The central focus of this discussion revolves around the nature of reality, particularly within the context of quantum mechanics and perception. Our exploration builds upon critical philosophical ideas from Albert Einstein and Rabindranath Tagore, as well as the Schrödinger's cat thought experiment, leading us to deeper philosophical and scientific inquiries about the superposition state of the universe and its relationship to observation. This extended analysis also explores how different sensory systems across species, including the mantis shrimp housefly and even hypothetical alien life forms, may experience and collapse quantum states into entirely different realities, depending on their unique perceptions. Einstein, Tagore, and the nature of reality. The discussion began with the famous encounter between Einstein and Tagore, where Einstein argued that reality exists independently of human observation. Einstein believed in an objective reality that exists whether or not we are there to observe it. This idea contrasts sharply with quantum mechanics, which suggests that reality exists in a superposition of states until observed, at which point it collapses into a specific reality. Tagore, on the other hand, emphasized that reality only exists insofar as it is perceived by conscious beings. For Tagore, without an observer, there is no reality. It exists only in the human experience. This philosophical tension, whether reality exists independently of observers or is contingent upon perception, was further explored through the lens of quantum mechanics. In quantum physics, Schrödinger's cat represents a system that is in a superposition, both dead and alive at the same time, existing in multiple states simultaneously. The system remains in this superposition until an observer interacts with it, causing the wave function to collapse and the system to settle into a definite state. This principle aligns with Tagore's view that reality is only defined when it is perceived. However, if quantum physics is correct, reality must exist in a superposition of states when no observation occurs, free from the constraints of any observer. This raises the critical question of what happens to reality in the absence of observers, and whether, as Einstein suggested, reality exists independently of us. In quantum mechanics, this reality is a superposition of possibilities, and thus exists in a state of potentiality until interaction occurs. Schrödinger's cat, time, and superposition. A pivotal point in the analysis is the idea of superposition, which asserts that until observed, a quantum system exists in all possible states. The well-known Schrödinger's cat thought experiment, where the cat is both alive and dead until an observation is made, highlights this concept, illustrating that quantum systems are not fixed until they are observed. The superposition of quantum states challenges our linear perception of time. Instead of existing in a strict temporal sequence, past, present, future, time at the quantum level might be nonlinear. In this framework, events could coexist simultaneously. Past, present, and future may not be distinct, but could exist in parallel until an observation collapses them into a single linear timeline. This idea extends the argument that reality is fluid, existing as potentialities, not as a fixed entity, until interacted with. This argument further suggests that reality exists as indeterminate and undetermined until an observer interacts with it, which collapses the superposition of possibilities into a singular, definite reality. This links to Tagore's view that reality is defined by the perception of the observer. However, the quantum perspective adds a layer of complexity, suggesting that the reality we observe is just one potential outcome from a range of possibilities, all of which are simultaneously present until observed. Alien perception and the role of biology. An extension of the thought experiment introduces the idea that different observers, depending on their biological systems, may collapse quantum superpositions differently. This leads to the argument that reality may not be universal or fixed for all beings, but rather dependent on how they perceive it. Let's consider an alien species with radically different sensory capabilities and anatomical structures compared to humans. While we perceive the universe in three-dimensional space-time, this alien might have the ability to perceive higher dimensions, nonlinear time, or entirely different forms of reality. When such a species observes a quantum system, it could collapse the superposition into a reality vastly different from what a human observer would experience, simply because the alien's sensory apparatus interacts with the quantum system in a unique way. This idea proposes that biological perception shapes reality, meaning that the human experience of the universe might differ dramatically from that of an alien species with a different biological framework. The observer effect in quantum mechanics suggests that the nature of reality is not static but dynamic, shaped by the perceptual abilities of the observer. Therefore, if an alien species were to observe an event or quantum system, their biology would shape the outcome of that observation. Mantis shrimp, a grounded example of perceptual differences. To ground this philosophical argument in reality, we can look at creatures on Earth, like the mantis shrimp, which possess 16 types of photoreceptor cells compared to humans' 3. The mantis shrimp can see ultraviolet light, polarized light, and a broader spectrum of color than humans can, effectively perceiving a reality that is invisible to us. This difference in perception offers a direct parallel to the idea that the observer's sensory inputs shape the collapse of quantum superpositions. The mantis shrimp's ability to detect polarized light and see UV light opens the possibility that it experiences a version of reality that is fundamentally different from what humans can observe. The same quantum system, for instance, a photon or particle, could collapse into one state when observed by a human, but when observed by a mantis shrimp, it might collapse into a different state due to the creature's vastly different sensory perception. This suggests that reality is not a fixed, objective state, but is dependent on the observer's perception. Housefly, temporal perception and nonlinear time. Similarly, the housefly, which processes visual information at 300 frames per second compared to humans' 60 frames per second, offers an example of how perception of time could influence how reality is observed and collapsed. Flies experience time non-linearly and at a higher resolution than humans. To a housefly, events unfold in rapid succession, almost like a high-speed film, whereas humans experience time in a sequential, slower manner. This discrepancy in the perception of time implies that the housefly might collapse quantum superpositions in ways humans cannot. The superposition of a quantum event might unfold in parallel or layered realities for the fly, while humans experience it in a linear, sequential manner. This example supports the argument that reality is not universal. It depends on the temporal and sensory limitations of the observer. Biological systems and the collapse of superposition. This leads to the argument that the collapse of a quantum superposition depends not just on the act of observation, but also on the biological system of the observer. Humans have a limited sensory system that perceives the universe in a particular way. However, other species, like the mantis shrimp, the housefly, or hypothetical alien species, may experience reality in fundamentally different ways, shaping their observations and the collapse of quantum superpositions accordingly. This brings us to the deeper question: is reality itself a fluid concept, one that is shaped by the biological framework and perception of the observer? Quantum mechanics implies that the universe exists in a state of potentiality until interacted with, and it is this interaction, whether by a human, a mantis shrimp, a housefly, or an alien species, that defines the collapse of reality. This idea suggests that reality is not static, but rather exists in a superposition of multiple possibilities, all of which are equally valid until an observer interacts with them. The role of time in quantum mechanics and the superposition state. In the quantum view, time may not exist in the same linear, deterministic way that we experience it. Instead, time might exist as a simultaneous continuum where the past, present, and future coexist until observed. This challenges our traditional conception of time as linear and suggests that all possibilities exist in parallel until an observation collapses them into a single timeline. If time itself is nonlinear, then the very act of observation could be seen as interacting with a multiverse of potential realities, where different observers collapse different possibilities based on their perception of time and space. This opens up the possibility that reality itself is not fixed, but rather exists in a fluid, dynamic state, where time, space, and dimensions are not rigid, but instead interact with the observer in a more fluid and flexible manner. Conclusion: the idea that reality is dependent on perception offers a deep philosophical and scientific question about the nature of existence. Through the lens of quantum mechanics, we see that reality exists in a superposition of states until observed, and that observation plays a crucial role in determining which version of reality is realized. However, as we explore the idea further, we see that biological and sensory systems shape how these quantum states are perceived and collapsed. Just as humans experience time and space in one way, other creatures, like the mantis shrimp or housefly, and even potential alien life forms, experience time and space in fundamentally different ways. These beings could collapse quantum states into different forms, creating different versions of reality, depending on how their biological systems interact with the universe. Ultimately, reality itself is fluid, malleable, and dependent on the observer's interaction with the superposition of quantum states. Whether it is through the biological systems of humans, the sensory capabilities of the mantis shrimp, or the perceptual framework of an alien species, each observer shapes reality by collapsing the quantum superposition into a definite form. Thus, the universe we experience is not fixed or objective, but a dynamic, ever-changing potentiality shaped by the perception of the observer. This realization challenges the very foundations of how we understand reality, time, and existence, suggesting that our perceptions, influenced by both biology and observation, play an integral role in defining the nature of the universe, which by its very nature, in its superposition of states, suggests that humanity's 3D interactions with it defines our own version of the universe, leaving other plausible versions open to the particular multidimensional experiences of other entities. The inevitable question now would be, if humanity were able to interact with the universe without causing it to collapse into our 3D dimensional reality, would we be able to navigate through other dimensions?